I never believed a random moment could reroute an entire life. I always thought change came loudly, through breakups, breakdowns, or decisions you saw coming weeks in advance. Not in a quiet coffee shop on a Tuesday evening, after a long day of pretending I had everything together. I had only gone there to kill time. Work had drained me the way it always did. Endless emails, deadlines stacked on top of each other, people expecting answers I didn't have. I told myself I deserved a coffee before going home to my apartment. The same apartment with pale walls, a ticking clock, and silence that felt heavier the longer I lived with it. That's where I met him. I was standing in line, scrolling through my phone half present when my card slipped out of my wallet. I didn't notice. I was already thinking about everything I still had to do that night. Then a voice behind me said softly, "Hey, sorry you dropped this." I turned around, slightly embarrassed, and saw him holding my card. Our fingers brushed when I took it back, and for a second something strange happened. Not fireworks. Not sparks. Just stillness. Like the noise in my head paused. He smiled, easy, a little awkward, and joked about how he usually dropped his dignity instead of his wallet. I laughed before I could stop myself. Real laugh. The kind that surprises you when it escapes. We moved forward in line together, and somehow the conversation didn't fade like it usually does with strangers. We complained about the slow service, the overpriced muffins, the weather that couldn't decide what season it was supposed to be. Small things. Safe things. When it was my turn to order, I asked him what he usually got. He told me he ordered a vanilla latte without syrup and pretended it was healthier. I smirked and said I'd try it, but if it was terrible I'd blame him. We waited at the counter for our drinks. Normally this is where people turn back to their phones, where the moment ends politely. But he stayed facing me. Like he wasn't in a rush to disappear. I introduced myself and held out my hand. When he shook it, I noticed his grip was warm and steady. Mine wasn't. My hands always shook a little when I was nervous, even when I pretended not to be. When his drink came out first, he lifted it and joked that this was usually the part where he said it was nice to meet me and then spent the next week overthinking everything he didn't say. I smiled because I understood that feeling more than I wanted to admit. Before my fear could talk me out of it, he asked if I wanted to sit for a few minutes. "Just coffee," he said. "No pressure." I hesitated. I always hesitated. In my head I ran through 100 reasons not to. I was tired. I didn't have the energy. I didn't want another almost connection that went nowhere. But something about the way he asked, calm, unexpected, made me nod. 5 minutes, I said. Those 5 minutes turned into 45. We sat by the window and talked about work, traffic, how everything cost too much and gave too little back. He told me he worked in IT support, fixing things that were always breaking. I told him I worked in a medical office buried in paperwork and insurance claims, and he said it sounded like his personal nightmare. I told him it was mine too. He was funny but not loud about it. Observant. He listened instead of waiting to talk. Every time I thought the conversation might slow down, he asked something real. Not invasive, just human. At one point he asked if I lived alone. I told him yes. I mentioned a long relationship that had ended years ago. I joked about keeping 2 houseplants alive and calling it emotional growth. He laughed, but I noticed the pause after. Like he sensed there was more I wasn't saying. There was. Before we left, he asked if I wanted to get dinner sometime. Somewhere that didn't smell like burned coffee beans. I looked down at my cup, then back up at him. I felt that familiar weight in my chest. The calculation, the risk assessment, the quiet fear of disappointing someone. But I said yes. We exchanged numbers. That night we texted a little. Nothing dramatic. Just easy messages that didn't feel forced. When Saturday came, I told myself not to expect too much. Still, when I walked into the restaurant and saw him waiting, something in me softened. Dinner felt natural. No pretending. No performance. Just 2 people talking. Then, somewhere between the main course and the check, I felt it. That pressure in my chest I always felt when things started to matter. I went quiet. He noticed immediately. When he asked if I was okay, I took a deep breath. My hands trembled as I folded my napkin. I told him I didn't like hiding things. Then I looked straight at him and said the sentence I had practiced in my head 1,000 times. I'd understand if you wanted to leave. He frowned slightly, confused. And that's when I told him. I told him I had 2 kids. I watched his face carefully, bracing for the shift. The polite withdrawal. The moment men usually gave themselves permission to disappear. My voice stayed steady, but inside I was already preparing to be alone again. The silence after I said it felt louder than the restaurant itself. I have 2 kids. I watched him carefully, the way I always did in that moment. I'd learned to read the smallest changes. Tightened jaw, forced smile, eyes darting toward the exit like they were already calculating the fastest way out. I hated that I'd learned that skill. He didn't say anything right away. He just sat there looking at me, really looking at me. Not at my hands shaking around the napkin. Not at the table. At my face. "I don't expect anything from you," I added quickly, the words spilling out before he could respond. "I just don't like surprises. And I'd understand if this is too much. Most people—" "Hey," he interrupted gently. I stopped. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "You don't need to explain it like you're apologizing." That caught me off guard. "I'm not scared," he continued. "I'm just processing. Not because you did anything wrong." I searched his face for dishonesty, for pity, for discomfort. That I saw concern. Real concern. "I just want to know something," he said. "Are you okay?" That question almost broke me. No one ever asked that part. I let out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "I'm tired," I admitted. "All the time. But I'm okay." He nodded like that made sense. Like my life didn't scare him. When we left the restaurant, I braced myself again. This was usually where things faded, where texts slowed, excuses appeared, connections quietly dissolved. But that night when I got home and put my keys down, my phone buzzed. "I had a good time tonight. I hope you got home safe." I stared at the screen longer than necessary. "I did," I replied. "Thank you for dinner." Then after a pause, another message from him. I meant what I said. "I'm not running." Something inside my chest shifted. Over the next few days, our messages became part of my routine. Short check-ins. Simple honesty. No pressure to perform. I texted him during my lunch break. He replied when he could. At night, when the kids were finally asleep and the house quieted down, we talked a little more. One evening, I admitted something I rarely said out loud. "I haven't dated seriously in almost 4 years," I typed. "Every time someone finds out about the kids, they slowly disappear." He didn't reply right away. I told myself not to overthink it. Then my phone rang. Hearing his voice felt different. Softer than I expected. Steadier. "I didn't want to text this," he said. "I wanted you to hear it. Your kids don't scare me." I swallowed hard. "I just don't want my life to overwhelm you," I said quietly. "I don't need easy," he replied. "I just want real." That was the first time I let myself believe him a little. By Friday we planned another date. Nothing fancy. Just a walk through a park near my neighborhood. I arrived early, nervous, tugging at my sleeves like I always did when I wasn't sure I deserved something good. When he showed up, he smiled like he was genuinely happy to see me. Halfway through the walk I stopped. I needed him to understand something before things went any further. "My kids come first," I said. "Always. I don't have spontaneous weekends or last-minute trips. My life is homework, dentist appointments, bills, and exhaustion." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking to be rescued," I continued. "I just need honesty." He looked at me calmly. "I'm not asking you to change anything." That scared me more than rejection ever had. "You might not know what you're signing up for," I said. "I don't need to," he replied. "Not all at once." We kept walking side by side, the silence comfortable. That night I told him about my daughter. Quiet, thoughtful, always drawing. Then my son, loud, curious, never still. When he asked why I stayed when most men didn't, I answered honestly. "I don't want something easy," he said. "I want something real." That was the moment my guard cracked. Not fully. Just enough. Before we left, I told him I wasn't ready for anyone to meet my kids yet. He nodded without hesitation. "That's okay," he said. "I'm not in a hurry." Later that night I texted him something I hadn't expected to feel. "Being around you makes things quieter in my head." I didn't realize it then, but that was the beginning of everything changing. The week after that walk felt different. Our messages became part of my life. Small, steady, grounding. He didn't try to fix me or my chaos. He just existed alongside it, quietly present. I told him about the little things like my daughter struggling with a school project or my son losing his homework again. He listened. Really listened. And I realized something. I didn't have to carry everything alone anymore. One evening after the kids were asleep, I stared at my phone for a long time. I knew what I was about to do could change everything or end it entirely. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then I typed, "I'm scared to let someone in. But I trust you. I hope you really mean it, that my life won't scare you away." His reply came almost immediately. "I'm not leaving. I want to be here, with you, with all of it." I stared at the screen. My heart was pounding, my chest tight, but I smiled in a way I hadn't smiled in years. Felt safe. The next day he called. Hearing his voice, soft and open, made something inside me relax. For over an hour we talked about work, life, the exhaustion of juggling responsibilities, and the fear of letting anyone close. I realized he wasn't trying to impress me. He just wanted to understand me, and I wanted him to. By Friday we made plans for another date. "Just a walk," he said, but that walk felt like a promise. I wore my favorite hoodie and jeans, pulled my hair into a messy bun, and waited nervously. I couldn't remember the last time I felt this exposed, yet not afraid. When he arrived, he greeted me with that calm smile that seemed to tell me everything was going to be okay. We walked together side by side, talking about random things at first. Work, the weather, what we had for lunch. But then I stopped mid-step. I needed him to hear the truth. "My kids come first," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Always. I don't have spontaneous weekends. My life. It's all homework, bills, dentist appointments, and exhaustion." He didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He nodded. "I'm not asking to be rescued," I said quickly, worried he might misunderstand. "I just want honesty. I can't do lies or pretending." "I understand," he said softly. "I don't need you to change anything." I wanted to believe him, but my heart screamed that people rarely meant what they said. Still, there was something in his calm, steady gaze that made me think, maybe this time could be different. "You might not know what you're signing up for," I warned, more to myself than to him. "I don't need to know all at once," he said. "I just need to know if you want me in your life." The weight of those words settled around me like a soft blanket. I realized he didn't expect perfection. He wasn't asking for everything right away. Just presence. Just me letting him in piece by piece. So I did. I told him about my daughter, how she loved drawing, how quiet and thoughtful she was. Then my son, full of energy, always moving, constantly asking questions. I told him about my fear of never doing enough, of disappointing them somehow. He listened. Not judging. Not flinching. Just listening. And when I asked hesitantly why he stayed when most men didn't, he answered simply, "I don't want something easy. I want something real." I let that sink in. I let the walls I'd built for years start to crumble. Not completely, but enough to see the man who was standing beside me willing to stay. Before the walk ended, I told him I wasn't ready for him to meet the kids yet. He nodded without hesitation, respecting the boundaries I'd held for so long. That night, I texted him something I never thought I'd feel comfortable saying. "Being around you makes things quieter in my head." And that was the beginning. For the first time in years, I allowed someone to be part of my life. Really part of it. And it felt lighter somehow. It started with a text I almost didn't send. "Are you free this Saturday? I think it's time you met them. Just as a friend for now." My fingers hovered over the send button longer than I wanted. The reality of what I was asking terrified me. This wasn't just coffee dates or quiet walks. This was my kids, my life. The chaos, the noise, the exhaustion I carried every single day. But I sent it anyway. When I got his reply, simple, calm, reassuring, I felt my chest relax. "I'll be there. Don't worry." Saturday arrived with the usual mix of controlled chaos. Bikes scattered on the sidewalk. Chalk drawings covering the driveway. The kind of normal life that's beautiful and messy all at once. I wondered if he'd be overwhelmed. I worried he'd change his mind at the last second. When he pulled up, I felt my heart skip. There he was, waiting with that easy smile, looking like he belonged in my world even though it was my world alone until that moment. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and opened the door. "Come in," I said, trying to sound casual. The kids were immediately curious. My son, the unstoppable ball of energy, ran toward him, shouting questions before introductions were even made. My daughter, quiet and observant, lingered on the couch, eyes wide, assessing him like she always did with strangers. I introduced him carefully. "This is my friend," I said. "He's come to help me with a project today." He smiled warmly, kneeling down to greet them on their level. "I heard you like dinosaurs," he said to my son. That earned a squeal of approval. Then he turned to my daughter. "And I hear you're quite the artist?" Her eyes brightened slightly, the first crack of shyness melting. She nodded, showing him a sketch she had tucked under her arm. He didn't just glance at it. He really looked, commenting on details, asking questions, engaging with her as if what she made mattered. I wanted to cry. Finally, someone who didn't treat my life like an obstacle. For the next couple of hours he settled into our chaos as if he'd always belonged. He helped my daughter with her project, patiently guiding her without taking over. He played with my son, following his energetic loops around the living room without complaint. I hovered nearby, pretending to sip tea while secretly watching him navigate my life with ease. And he noticed me watching. He caught my eye and smiled softly. That look, gentle, understanding, made me realize he wasn't just staying for me. He was choosing to stay for all of us. By the time the kids went upstairs to play, I sank onto the couch, exhausted but calmer than I'd been in years. He sat next to me, close but not intrusive. "You handled that well," I admitted, finally letting my defenses drop a little. "I didn't do anything special," he said softly. "They're great kids. You raised them well. I just got to be part of it for a bit." I stared at him, overwhelmed by the honesty in his words. No judgment, no fear, no hesitation. Just acceptance. When he left that day, the kids waved. My son yelling like we'd known him forever, my daughter shyly lifting a hand. And I felt a strange, terrifying hope stirring inside me. Maybe this time things could be different. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the couch, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. Not really. I could feel him there, quietly present in my life now. And for the first time I allowed myself to believe, maybe someone could stay. After that first day with the kids, life started shifting in ways I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. He didn't come to visit. He came to be present. He arrived at our home and immediately fell into our rhythm, not trying to control it, just existing in it. He helped with dinner when I was overwhelmed, guided my son through homework without making it feel like a chore, and sat patiently with my daughter as she showed him her sketches. He didn't act like my life was an inconvenience. He treated it as if it mattered. And the truth is, it did. One evening, chaos was in full swing. Pots clanged in the kitchen, the kids ran in circles, and I felt the familiar tightness in my chest. He stepped in before I even had to ask. "Pass me the cutting board," he said to me calmly, taking over a small task. He redirected my son when he nearly knocked over a plate. He laughed with my daughter when she told a shy joke. And through it all, he never made me feel judged, never implied I was failing. Just support. Just steady presence. I watched him from the counter and realized something I hadn't admitted to myself yet. I had been carrying all of this alone for years, and it didn't have to be that way anymore. Later, when the kids were finally asleep, I sat beside him on the couch, exhausted and relieved. "You make this easier," I admitted quietly, leaning back into the cushions. "I'm not here for the easy parts," he said softly. I laughed, a little bitter, a little relieved. "That scares me." "Good," he said with a small smile. "I'm not here to make you comfortable. I'm here to stay." Those words settled deep in me. For the first time I felt like I could breathe. Like it was okay to let someone in fully, to trust someone with the chaos, the kids, the life I had built alone. Days became routines, shared responsibilities, small victories. We cooked together, laughed over spilled juice, debated over homework, and argued gently over chores. We became a team without even realizing it. One Friday, her car broke down after work. The panic and exhaustion in my chest was familiar, but he didn't hesitate. He drove over, fixed the car, and left it ready for me the next day. I watched him handle my life, not as a visitor but as someone who belonged there. And I realized I hadn't just invited him into my world. I had welcomed a partner into it. Weeks passed and life grew louder and fuller. Some nights my son fell asleep on the couch next to him. My daughter left sketches out for him to see. He became part of our routine. Quietly, naturally. And then one evening after the kids were in bed, I sat beside him on the couch, my hand brushing against his. "I think it's time," I whispered. He looked at me, questioning but calm. "Would you consider moving in?" I asked. The pause wasn't hesitation. It was weight, the recognition of what that meant. And then he smiled. "I want to be here. With all of you, he said. That was it. No drama. No speeches. Just a quiet, steady commitment. A month later he moved in. Clothes, books, tools, little pieces of his life that began to weave seamlessly into ours. And suddenly mornings weren't lonely. Dinners weren't frantic and solitary. Nights weren't quiet, heavy with isolation. We argued sometimes. We laughed a lot. We grew together in ways I hadn't dared imagine. And for the first time in years I realized something profound. This wasn't temporary. This was home. Looking back, it all began in that coffee shop, that small, quiet moment. A dropped card, a smile, a conversation that stretched far longer than I expected. That moment didn't just change my life. It gave me someone willing to walk into my chaos, someone who didn't run, someone who chose to stay. And from that choice we built a life. Slowly, imperfectly, but real. Together. After he moved in, life settled into something I had never imagined possible. Messy, loud, exhausting, and completely ours. Mornings became rituals. My daughter sitting at the kitchen table, half asleep, sketching quietly while my son raced down the stairs shouting about the latest Lego creation. He would make coffee for the adults, pour cereal for the kids, and somehow find the patience to answer 1,000 questions before anyone had truly woken up. I watched him from the doorway, heart swelling with a mix of awe and relief. He wasn't just part of my life. He was part of my life. Some nights the house was chaotic. My son refusing to eat, my daughter crying over a broken art project, me barely keeping it all together. And he was there, steering, guiding, calming, just steady presence. He never acted like I owed him anything. He never treated my life like an inconvenience. He became home. Then one quiet night after the kids were asleep, I found myself sitting on the couch staring out the window. He sat beside me, hand brushing against mine. I told him how different everything felt now, how much lighter it was having him in my life, how safe I finally felt letting someone in. He just listened as he always did. And then, in a moment that stopped time, I confessed something that terrified me. I think, I'm pregnant. I was shaking, bracing for fear, for doubt, for anything that might undo the fragile calm we had built. He didn't hesitate. He took my hand, looked into my eyes and said, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. The relief that flooded me was indescribable. For the first time in years, fear didn't rule the room. Just peace. Just certainty. The next morning I told the kids. My son squealed, jumping up and down with excitement at the idea of being a big brother. My daughter asked quiet, thoughtful questions, absorbing the news carefully but with joy. And then she looked at me, her eyes wide, asking the question I already knew the answer to. Are you staying forever? I knelt down to her level, feeling the weight and wonder of it all. Yes, I said. I'm staying. And that was it. No hesitations, no qualifications. Just truth. Life moved forward, messy and beautiful. We cleaned the spare room, debated baby names, decorated the fridge with drawings and notes. Doctor visits filled our calendars. Some days were overwhelming. Some days were exhausting. All of them felt right because we were doing them together. When the crib was finally set up in the nursery, I stood in the doorway, hands on my stomach, tears in my eyes. I couldn't believe this was happening. I had never thought I'd have another chance at this kind of happiness. He came up beside me, wrapping his arms around my waist. You deserve this, he whispered. All of this. Looking back, I realize it all started with a small moment in a coffee shop. The dropped card, the polite smile, the conversation that didn't end after 5 minutes. That moment gave me someone willing to walk into my chaos, to stay through the noise and exhaustion, to love all of us without conditions. I never wanted to leave. Not him. Not this life. Not the messy, loud, imperfect family we were building together. And somehow, through patience, honesty, and small acts of care, we created something real. A family. A home. A life full of love, second chances, and quiet happiness that felt more powerful than anything I had ever dared hope for. The coffee shop didn't just change my life. It gave me everything I had been waiting for.